The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selena Mackenzie.
Now, are you a whiskey lover, or do you think you might want to try it for a Christmas tipple? Well, our first guest has written a book called Savour, which is a guide to tasting and exploring whiskies of the world. Whether you love whiskey or you aren't sure where to start, Kristiane Westray will take you on an immersive and inclusive expedition through the spirit. Well, I'm delighted to say that she joins us now. Welcome to the show, Kristiane.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. What a festive time of year to talk about whiskey.
I know, it's the perfect time, isn't it? And I hate to say this, being a woman, but I normally think of whiskey being pretty much a man's drink, but you're a real connoisseur, aren't you?
Well, yes. I've been writing about whiskey now since 2012, which seems crazy to me. But the misconceptions that whiskey is a drink predominantly for older men just clings on. I'm delighted to say that things are changing. And I do think that by talking about the flavour of whiskey and the stories behind it, we can get it to appeal to a much broader audience.
So would you call me a heathen if I said, could you have a mixer with it? Because I think it's quite sharp.
I would say you drink whiskey however you like. And I love drinking whiskey in a highball. A highball is basically just whiskey in a mixer. I often will have whiskey and ginger ale down the pub with my friends. So I would not call you a heathen at all. I would say carry on and enjoy it.
Then I'll give it a try this Christmas. You call it a highball, do you?
A highball, yes. So it's a big drink in Japan, and historically that's how whiskey's been drunk over there. And they sort of caught on globally now, which is fantastic. And I wish more people knew about them.
Yeah, well, they will if they read your book or listen to this interview, maybe. So how do you drink yours? Do you drink it on the rocks or with water or just neat?
Well, it really depends on my mood, who I'm with, what I'm doing. I like to think there's a difference between drinking whiskey, like you would with your friends if we're having a drink now, and tasting whiskey. Drinking whiskey, the whiskey's just there to aid having a nice time. You know, you're enjoying the flavour, but you're enjoying the conversation more. So if I'm drinking it, I'll have it maybe with ice, with water, as I say, with a mixer like ginger ale or soda, in a cocktail, however. If you're tasting whiskey, where you're maybe analysing it or judging it in a competition or writing your own tasting notes, then you might want to think a bit more about having it neat and then later adding water to unlock some more of those aroma and flavour notes. But as long as you're enjoying it, it really doesn't matter how you drink it.
So you can go on a whiskey tasting, a bit like a wine tasting.
Yes, there are so many bars all around the world and distilleries that will offer tasting experiences, and it's so much fun. So often you'll sit down and maybe there's a theme, maybe it's one distillery or single malts or blends or anything, and you'll get to taste maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 different ones, and it's so much fun. And I like to think that whiskey is quite similar to fragrances in a way. You know how you build up all these different notes, you've got base notes, mid notes, top notes. Whiskey and wine and anything like that, beer is exactly the same, and that's really what I want to talk about with Savour, like the experience of drinking it, the fun of it, the fact that you don't just have to sit and be a geek about it, you can just get into it however you want to.
It sounds great. So would you say if I went for a tasting menu and they would pair the wines with all the courses, could you do that with whiskey? I mean, would you have a dessert whiskey, for example?
I mean, you probably wouldn't have a dessert whiskey. Whiskey by law doesn't have any sugar added to it. But a lot of people do pair whiskey and food. There's a distillery in the US called Breckenridge that has an incredible bartender and chef there. And she makes all of these amazing dishes to pair with food. I personally am not a great cook, but I do, like I say, love a highballs, like a spirit in a mixer. And I think you can have that just as you would with wine. I think sometimes higher ABV spirits, just because of like the texture of them and how you experience the alcohol more when you're drinking it, I think that can be a bit off-putting sometimes if you're tasting food as well, which I think is why wine and beer is more commonly enjoyed with food, but there's definitely nothing to stop you trying it. I also love whiskey and cheese pairings and whiskey and chocolate pairings. They are divine.
Oh, yes, I could try that, definitely. I'll give that a go. Let's get down to basics then, because I know very little. I know it has Gaelic roots. Is it from Scotland, whiskey, originally?
There's a whole load of debate about where distilling grains started from. There's some research recently that suggests it comes from the Netherlands even. There's definitely rivalry between Scotland and Ireland about who was distilling whiskey first. But when you go back to the basics, that whiskey is essentially a spirit made from grains or a distilled beer, there will be lots of places in the world that have been distilling for centuries, if not millennia. And now whiskey is made all around the world in hundreds of countries. foods, and that's incredibly exciting. So yes, it's got a long history, but today it's a truly international spirit.
Yeah, for sure. And the only ones I think I've heard of, probably if I heard of others, I'd say yes, I have. But I've heard of a single malt. Don't know what it is, but I've heard of a single malt, and I've heard of bourbon. That's about it. Being a single malt, is there a double and triple malt then as well, or is that just the type?
I don't know. I mean, you can kind of, in terms of the main styles, a lot of it depends on where it's made and the rules surrounding it. It sounds incredibly boring, but I promise it isn't. And it's the same with a lot of food. So geographical indications and things like this are things like Cornish pasties, or I know obviously you guys are based in Spain. There's loads of them for Spain. Sherry, for example, has a GI. And it's where, you know, the processes and the ingredients and all of this, you have a legal framework. And if you make something according to that, it can have a certain name. So single malt Scotch is made from 100% malted barley, aged for at least 3 years, and it's made at one distillery. The single bit in single malt refers to the single distillery. So you know, if you're drinking a single malt Scotch whiskey has been made entirely at one distillery in Scotland from 100% malted barley. What's exciting about bourbon, it uses a completely different set of rules, made in the US from at least 51% corn. So that's why it tastes sweeter. And sometimes having a little bit of this knowledge is by no means essential. You can enjoy whiskey knowing absolutely nothing about it. And that's another key message in Savour as well. You don't need to be a geek. You don't need to be a nerd. You can just get straight into it. Like I often say to my friends in the pub, you don't worry about how a pint of Guinness is made. You just enjoy your Guinness. So for me, whiskey's the same. But it is quite fun to know those little differences. Like bourbon's sweeter because it's made predominantly from corn, whereas malt is made predominantly from malted barley. And that's why it has that sometimes quite a richer, rounder, sometimes, I guess, fruitier flavour.
I might try a bourbon because if it's a bit sweeter, I might like it a bit more.
Yes, if you like popcorn or things like that, it's really similar to that flavour-wise.
Now, they are made, I know that they're made in distilleries, but in casks, is that correct?
Yes, so whiskey has to be in the EU and the UK aged for at least 3 years in barrels. There will be different rules in different places around what your casks are made from, but generally speaking, oak is super commonly used. Other woods are used in different parts of the world as well. But yeah, and it's the casks and that maturation process that packs in so much flavour. And it's really exciting because casks work, they're airtight, they're watertight, you would hope, so no leaks, but they're not airtight, so they breathe. And what that means is whatever's in your cask, so let's use sherry as an example, a sherry cask, it breathes, so it draws the sherry into the oak staves and out again. So when you tip out that sherry and use the sherry in whiskey maturation, which happens a lot, the whiskey then gets drawn in and out of the staves as well. So then you get little bits of sherry characteristics coming through in your whiskey. And that's why it's really exciting to taste like ex-bourbon whiskies, ex-sherry whiskies, ex-wine cask whiskies. They all have their own unique character. So much flavour to be found and explored and delved into.
And what, Kristiane, is a capsule collection?
Oh, I love to talk about this. So in Savour, there's little sections throughout it that are like handy tips for if you want to get into whiskey, things that might help you. So there's kind of like a stereotype in whiskey that you're only a proper whiskey drinker, heavy quote marks implied, if you've got a big whiskey collection. And my take is a bit like a capsule wardrobe with your clothes, where you might have quite a tight edit of stuff you come back to every day. You could build a capsule whiskey collection where you might have a smoky whiskey, maybe a smoky Scotch whiskey, like an Islay whiskey or something like this, a bourbon, as we talked about earlier, which is very sweet with popcorn, a fruity single malt and various flavours. But with 3, 4 or 5 bottles, you could span such a wealth of that flavour spectrum. And you've got mixable whiskies in there, smoky whiskies, savoury whiskies, sweeter whiskies. You just don't need a big collection. You can achieve all of that, as I say, in 3, 4, 5 bottles. But that's what I mean when I talk about a capsule collection. It's just undoing those stereotypes that people kind of can get locked out of whiskey. It's like, oh, if I've not been to loads of distilleries, or I don't have 50 bottles, or I don't know loads, then how can I be a whiskey drinker? And I'm like, you can. If you enjoy whiskey, you're a whiskey drinker. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're clearly passionate about it. Have you been to different whiskey communities around the world?
Yes, and do you know what? That's one of the best things about my job as a whiskey writer and educator is getting to travel to lots of different distilleries, lots of different places, and see the communities there. And I love it. And a place on my bucket list, so I've not actually been, but I think this really shows how whiskey can soak up the culture that surrounds it. In Melbourne, there's a really big coffee culture and a really big brewing culture. And when I was researching a feature a couple of years ago, I was learning about not just how distilleries there use sort of ex-wine casks from local vineyards, but there's a real trend for whiskey and coffee cocktails. Oh. And I just love how different. Yeah, I know, it's incredible. And just how like the flavor stories and the people stories are so unique to the different places. There's a distillery I write about in Savour in Namibia. So peated whiskey, if people don't know, is a way of using traditionally peat that you would dig out of the ground to kind of like smoke your barley kernels at the start of the production process. There's a lot of conversation around that at the moment, quite rightly, around how environmentally sound it is or stuff like this. And different peat regions will have slightly different flavours depending on the vegetation of that area. And this distillery in Namibia, instead of using peat, it's using elephant dung to smoke the whiskey because it's a plentiful supply and it's local. So, you know, there's another example of how you can get a real sense of place in your whiskies too.
Yeah. Well, coffee and whiskey, I mean, that's your typical Irish coffee, isn't it? That's with whiskey.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I think what a treat for this time of year, an Irish coffee. And you don't need any like fancy equipment to do it. You can just do it at home, play around, experiment. Don't be afraid of mixing your own whiskey cocktails. Just give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah. Are there different whiskey cocktails? I know that there's the coffee, but you know, you see cocktails on a cocktail menu and you don't very often see so many with whiskey in.
Yeah, I do think there's been, again, another misconception that you couldn't mix single malt, or, you know, it's not proper to mix single malt, or you wouldn't mix something good. It's a waste. Very, again, heavy quote marks implied. But for me, I look at whiskey cocktails a bit like cooking, right? If you are making an incredible meal, you want your best quality ingredients. So it's never a bad thing to mix a single malt. There are incredible whiskey cocktails out there made with single malts. And I think sometimes we look at bourbons and ryes, American whiskey styles, and how they've been used in old fashions. And I'm like, yeah, fantastic. Let's use that with Scotch and whiskies from all around the world as well. And don't complicate it. You know, we were talking about highballs earlier, whiskey in a mixer. That's a great whiskey cocktail. And again, you don't need any fancy equipment to do it. You get your spirit, your mixer, maybe a garnish if you're feeling fancy, and away you go. But I'm very into my old fashions at the moment. Just stir it down and use loads of ice and a nice wedge of orange, and it's delicious.
It's interesting. I remember being at a bar probably about a year, 18 months ago, and it seemed like the trendiest thing. Everyone was going to the bar and asking for an old fashioned, and I hadn't got a clue what it was. But it is, of course, a whiskey.
Yeah, very much so. And there are people out there who will know cocktails far better than I do, like whiskey historians. And, you know, you can trace the history of these like cocktails back often to the Prohibition era, about, you know, in the sort of early 1900s in the US, 1920s in the US. And, you know, all these speakeasies and these party scenes and people just enjoying whiskey cocktails that, you know, with spirits have been smuggled into the country. And I just think what a fun time. And I think we get so caught up sometimes in, you know, the properness of whiskey. And I'm like, well, if you look back in history, people are drinking cocktails and partying, and they've got whiskey and they're enjoying it and they're celebrating. So yeah, I think that's really important. Whiskey isn't just a studious drink, it's a fun drink too.
Yeah, and it's becoming more mainstream. And I think it should be like wine. I mean, you can enjoy a glass of wine or a bottle of wine, and it might be the cheapest on the market. It might not be the most expensive, but if you like the taste, that's all that matters, isn't it?
100%. You are spot on with that. So some of my very favourite whiskies are not, you know, fancy whiskies. There's one called Table Whiskey from a company called Portobello Distillery, and it's £35 a bottle for the most delicious, you know, crack it open with your friends and just have a great night with it. And, you know, I know that £35, I guess, I mean, I know that you guys are shopping in euros, but like, that's still quite a lot of money to a lot of people. And I think, you know, if we're talking about Christmas gifting, if you're spending 35, 40, 50 pounds on someone, I've got to like you quite a lot to spend that much on you. So yeah, I just think sometimes we just think old is better, more expensive is better, but there are incredible affordable whiskies out there. So yeah, it's definitely not about just drinking the finest in quote mark stuff.
Yeah, well, I've definitely written down bourbon and also old fashioned. I might be trying that one as well this Christmas. Is this your first book, Kristiane?
It is. It really is. And it's been such a joy to put it together. It was so much fun. And I mean, working on everything from the proposal onwards. And, the hardest bit was deciding, cutting down, I guess, which distilleries to include. So the main section is called the Modern Makers, and it's distilleries and brands and blenders from all around the world who are doing things differently. And there are so many incredible makers that I probably could have made it 3 times the size, telling all of the stories of all of the amazing ideas and approaches. But that was the hardest part. But it was honestly a joy to work with it. And the team at Bloomsbury are brilliant. So yeah, hopefully the first with more to come.
Well, that's it. It sounds like there's a book 2 in you as well.
I mean, there's so much to say about whiskey. It's hard to know when to stop.
Wonderful. Well, we're selling your book right now on our website for our listeners. If you're still looking for a Christmas present, you can buy it now. You've got a few days. It's called Savour, a guide to tasting and exploring whiskies of the world. It's by Kristiane Westray, who we're chatting to now. And just simply click on TRE.radio and click on the virtual bookshop banner. Do you also have a website, Kristiane?
It's just KristianeWestray.com or just at Kristiane Westray on Instagram. That's the best place to find me.
Great stuff. Well, it's been great to chat to you. I've learned such a lot in the last 20 minutes. So thank you very much. And have a super Christmas. I'm sure you'll have one on Christmas Day.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.